Welcome to geography class today, 8th grade. Today we're going to be wrapping up our study of Western Europe. We'll read through our chapter summaries from lesson 1, 2, and 3, and then go through our vocabulary builder. Lesson 1, the physical geography of Western Europe. Western Europe includes the following nations: Ireland, the United Kingdom, England, Wales, and Scotland, and Northern Ireland in that United Kingdom, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, Austria, Switzerland, and the tiny countries of Monaco and Liechtenstein. A lot of Western Europe is in an area called the Northern European Plain. Two mountain ranges, the Pyrenees and the Alps, separate Western Europe from Southern Europe. They also separate the climates: cooler climates in the north and warm, dry climates to the south. Europe's long, irregular coastline touch the Atlantic Ocean as well as the Baltic, Mediterranean, and North Seas. The North Sea is a shallow part of the Atlantic Ocean that separates Britain from the rest of Europe. It is important for trade and fishing, and in its location of major oil and gas reserves, people in the Netherlands have to use dikes to keep the North Sea from flooding their land. The English Channel is an important sea route that connects the North Sea with the Atlantic Ocean and separates England and France. The Thames, the Rhine, the Elbe, the Danube, the Main, the Loire, and the Seine River are some of the main rivers in Western Europe. These rivers transport goods and people from some political borders and provide hydroelectric power. Western Europe has cool summers and mild winters. It has a milder climate than the other places in the world at the same latitudes because warm winds off the Atlantic Ocean moderate the climate. The southern areas of Western Europe have a Mediterranean climate with most of the rain falling in the spring and autumn. Most of Western Europe has rich, fertile soil, coal, and pockets of oil and natural gas. However, people don't use the coal as much anymore because they rely on the energy sources. Most of the British Isles has deciduous trees, whereas farther inland coniferous trees are more common. Lesson 2, the history of Western Europe. Early people of Western Europe were hunters and gatherers who became farmers. The Roman Empire spread throughout Europe and controlled France, most of Germany, and Britain. The Romans spread their beliefs, language, and technology. Christianity became the major religion. The Roman Catholic Church brought laws, education, and the institutions to Western Europe in the early years. As the Roman Empire weakened over the centuries, Huns invaded from the east, and Germanic groups, the Franks, Angles, Saxons, created kingdoms in the north. The Middle Ages brought further change to Western Europe. Feudalism brought the order to Western Europe during the Middle Ages in place of strong government. Under feudalism, kings gave land to nobles, and in turn the nobles provided the king with military support. Conflict over the regions brought about pilgrimages and crusades to foreign lands. The crusades brought back wealth and knowledge and changed Western Europe. War between France and England began in 1337 and lasted for over 100 years. In 1347, a plague called the Black Death killed whole towns of people. With too few people left to work, workers began to demand payment for their labors. In 1517, a German priest, Martin Luther, spurred a religious movement called the Protestant Reformation, challenging the Roman Catholic Church's power to wealth. The Enlightenment, a wave of discovery and scientific observation, swept Europe in the 1600s and 1700s. This led to reforms in government and to questioning the authority of kings and religion. The Industrial Revolution took place in Britain from 1760 to 1830. Nations became industrialized after the invention of the printing press. Soon people moved to cities seeking wealth and a better way of life. Most ended up working in factories. World War I began in 1914, involving all of Europe. Germany was punished for starting this war. In the atmosphere, Adolf Hitler rose to power and attempted to build a German empire, which led to World War II. Germany lost World War II to the Allies, the U.S., Britain, and the USSR, the Soviet Union, in 1945. Between 40 and 60 million people died in World War II. After World War II, the United States and Soviet Union were the leading world powers. The Cold War began between the two nations, where the threat of war was always present. The Cold War ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. Lesson 3, Life in Western Europe. Ethnic and language divisions have faded away, and one main language and ethnic culture is practiced in each country in Western Europe. Christianity became the major religion in Western Europe. However, people who have immigrated from Africa and Russia brought their own religion of Islam with them. Western Europe literature, music, art, and education practices continue to influence the cultures of the rest of the world. Professional sports such as soccer, rugby, and skiing, made popular in the region, have also spread to many other countries. Before World War II, Britain, France, and Germany were among the most powerful countries in the world. After World War II, the United States and Russia became the most powerful nations. Because of this, the European Union was formed in 1993 so that the European countries could compete economically with the United States, China, and Japan. The global financial crisis of 2008 caused many of the current struggles in Western Europe. Immigrants from Africa, Asia, and Eastern Europe looking for jobs and fleeing oppression have brought more diverse cultures, as well as racial and religious tensions, to the region. Our assignment for today brings us to our vocabulary builder. You can see here at the top of the page we have a word bank of the content vocabulary, and our directions are to complete each of the sentences with a word or term from the word bank. Let's read through it. Number 1. When there were no strong governments in Western Europe, the system of feudalism arose where kings gave land to nobles for military service. So you have kings and knights, and then you get the lower status, the peasants or the common folk of the lay of the land. Number 2, the time period of transition between ancient and modern Europe is called Middle Ages, also known as the Dark Ages, because there wasn't a huge influence of education and advancement. Since when we move into more modern history, it turns into the Enlightenment, and you get back to these noble practices of educating people and advancing society. Number 3, England's king had to share power with the lawmaking body known as Parliament. So they have elected representatives. There's 2 different houses of Parliament, the nobles and the commons. Number 4, because the Netherlands sit at a low elevation, the Dutch have built walls or barriers called dikes to hold back the water of the North Sea. The Dutch call lands that they have reclaimed from the sea polders and use them for farming and settlement. Number 6, the process of making bronze by melting and fusing tin and copper is called smelting. Number 7, strong winds that blow from west to east, called the blank, blow a constant stream of relatively warm air. In the northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere, you've got areas farther away from the equator that have that westward wind. That westward wind in Europe brings warm air from the tropics and warm water from the Atlantic currents to this area to moderate the climate. Number 8, the natural vegetation in most of British Isles is blank forest made of trees such as oak and maple. So that's oak and maple, we're going to say that it is deciduous, which means that they lose their leaves every year, just like we would experience here in our climate. Number 9, farther inland in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, the cooler climate grows blank trees such as firs and pine trees. Coniferous, that would be our example of a Christmas tree. Number 10, Western Europe today is a blank economy. It depends more on the services than it does on manufacturing. So we went from feudalism into the industrialization and now into a post-industrialization. Means that most of the jobs are not just factory jobs or manufacturing jobs. They've moved into the service or tertiary-based economy. 11, the Nazi government-sponsored murder of 6 million Jews is known as the Holocaust. Number 12, in the 1800s, as Western Europe blank, people left farming in large numbers and resettled in cities. Western Europe industrialized, people left farming and settled in cities. They were seeking jobs, better opportunity, and they often worked in factories as a result. Number 13, the Thames River becomes an blank when it reaches London and extends for 65 miles before it enters the North Sea. Estuary. Number 14, the religious journey to Jerusalem that people made in medieval times was called a pilgrimage. At this time in history in the church, there wasn't a lot of the teaching about salvation, so people believed that they had to do something to earn their salvation. They had to go visit the Holy Land to pay their respects and their praises to God, and they followed the teachings of the Catholic Church and the influence of the Pope to continue to send people to win back those lands, and were multiple attempts to fight against the people of Islam that had taken those areas or those Holy Lands. So you've got this kind of misnomer, misteaching that leads people to do these things, but in turn it brings back tons and tons of knowledge and experience from this region, even though the motivation behind it was somewhat misguided. The last section here has academic vocabulary. So these are words that are found in our study of Western Europe, but they can also just be simple vocabulary terms that we apply in everyday life. Number 15, a group made up of many different elements or parts is diverse. 16. To act or work together with others is to cooperate. To adjust or control something according to rules or laws is to regulate. 18. An explanation of why something happens which is proven or disproven by experimentation is a theory. And number 19. For a living thing to change a trait in order to survive is to adapt. That wraps up our summaries and vocabulary builder for Western Europe. Thanks for following along. God's blessings.